Hello, everyone. I'm Matthew Allen, and welcome to What a Book. Today, we continue on in Hanging Chads. Chapter 12 Spring-Heeled Jack. The bustling Christmas season finally concluded, and Maddy decided to spend New Year's back in Madison. She would arrive New Year's Eve, spend the next day at home to recover from an anticipated hangover, and fly back on January 2nd in order to attend her weekly Wednesday ritual with her friends, which would be held at Christie's house to celebrate her new daughter. She had not been back since her uncle's funeral, and she wanted to start the new year by visiting his gravesite. She also had bridges to rebuild with her two aunts. She rented a car at the airport and drove directly to her uncle's gravesite. His tombstone was 3 feet taller than most in the cemetery, as many people in the community had chipped in to purchase a most elegant tribute to their local luminary. There was a light dusting of snow, which Maddy carefully brushed away from the black marble. The surface of the stone glistened in the afternoon sun, and the engraving appeared to jump off the surface. There was no wind whatsoever, and her copper strands just lay motionless upon her solemn head as she stood in the frigid temperatures, reading this most beautiful and simple tribute. Joseph Angelo Argento, October 1st, 1942 to June 5th, 2017. Beloved husband, brother-in-law, uncle, and friend, shelter to many, justice for all. Well, I suppose you heard about the stupid shit I've been up to, Maddy began embarrassingly, looking down and shuffling her small feet as she spoke as though she were a 5-year-old trying to explain where the cookies had gone. Well, I don't have any real good excuses. I allowed my head to get fucked up, and I put a lot of people through needless worry. That's on me. I alone did that shit, and I alone have to fix it. I promise you. Starting this year, I'll do better. I'm not one for New Year's resolutions, but I'm gonna make you my New Year's promise, so here it goes. Maddy straightened herself, looked directly at the black marble, and began in an assertive voice. Numero uno. No more fucking drugs. Ever. That shit nearly killed me, and I liked it too much, so that shit's done. Numero tuo. Drinking back to normal levels. You know, just fucked up enough to have a good time, but not so fucked up that I'm gonna put myself in danger. Numero threo. No more sleeping around. Very much. I mean, if it's kinda a boyfriend, then I guess it's okay, but, well, no more one-night stands, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Unless they're super cute. But probably not even then. And definitely no married guys. Her voice dropped to a whisper as she leaned into the ebony gravestone and concluded with, Numero foro. Don't kill anybody this year. Even if they have it coming. I've gotten lucky so far, so I'd better hang that shit up while I'm ahead. She stood upright once more before concluding, Okay, that's it. I love you, and I miss you every fucking day, and I hope you're giving angels a bunch of shit about what's going on down here, 'cause they seem to be just sitting on their asses. Okay, I'm going now. She finished by wiping frozen tears from her lightly freckled beet-red cheeks. As she walked toward her car, a light breeze ruffled her copper strands as a lone bird chirped in the distance. Maddy arrived at the Argento home and was immediately embraced by Aunt Blair. Welcome home, dear. We're so excited to see you. Aunt Patty walked into the foyer and gazed upon her niece with a worried expression. Aunt Patty, I'm so sorry. I swear, I'll never... Oh, please don't hate me. Maddy broke down in tears as the elder aunt embraced her tightly and said soothingly, I could never hate you. You are the light of my life. Just don't pull this shit again, okay? Maddy nodded to her aunt as she relinquished her grip, both women wiping the tears from their eyes and smiling at each other. So, let's get ready for this fucking party. I'm ready to get fucked up, Patty exclaimed as the three women initiated their hasty preparations. There were about 30 people at the Argentos' home that evening, most of whom were close family friends. Patty, at 66, still had a knack for attracting companions 10 to 15 years her junior, and tonight was no different. Her still-toned legs were encased in black fishnets that were, in turn, frequently wrapped around a 50-something bleached blonde who was adorned with tattoos and a black flag long-sleeved tee. Maddy kind of liked this one. She had Tough tattooed on the knuckles of one hand and Love on the other. When not enveloped with her latest conquest, Patty was changing CDs or records on the stereo, especially when somebody dared to put on something that she found to be too mellow. "Who is fucking with the stereo?" she would bellow as an embarrassed guest would hastily try to put away something in the vein of Andrew Gold's greatest hits. "Okay, bitch, I love you, but you're banned from the stereo for tonight. This is a fucking party, not a family vacation," Patty would scold as she scoured the music collection for something more appropriate. Aunt Blair circulated around the party as she had always done, refreshing drinks, cleaning up, and engaging in idle chit-chat. There was one man at the party that Blair seemed to spend more time with than others. His name was Edgar, and had been a family friend for many years. He was 72 and had lost his wife a few years earlier to cancer. As the evening wore on, Maddy finally summoned up her courage and found her aunt in the kitchen filling the potato chip bowl. Aunt Blair?" Maddy awkwardly began. So, what's up with you and Edgar?" "Well, dear, there are some things that I do not feel I need to explain. But since you asked, we have known Edgar for a very long time, and he has always been a nice man. So we have been seeing each other from time to time to comfort each other." A rare blush encased Blair's perfect cheeks before she haphazardly picked up the bowl, spilling half of its contents upon the floor. "Well, now isn't that nice?" Blair said with exasperation. Through a half chuckle, Maddy said, "It's okay, Aunt Blair. That's your business, and I'm sorry I asked, but you're kinda acting like a schoolgirl, and I'm not the only one who noticed, so—" Blair cut her off immediately and sternly said, "Oh, a schoolgirl, am I? Well, listen here, little missy. Blair and Maddy broke down into laughter and embraced as Blair stated, "Okay, but even at this age, I still have needs, and I really don't want to discuss this any further. Okay?" "Yep, got it," Maddy replied as she began to sweep up the tragically wasted salted snack treats. Blair straightened herself and began leaving the kitchen before turning and saying, "Thank you for cleaning that up, and thank you for your understanding. You need to know that nobody can ever replace my Joseph." "I get it," Maddy stated in conclusion. "You are just a horny old bitch. Good for you is what I say. Just keep a lot of blue pills on hand." Patty concluded 2018 by playing a raucous rendition of Auld Lang Syne by Me First and the Gimme Gimmes. She welcomed 2019 by playing the uplifting Let the Day Begin by The Call. The last of the guests left the party around 3:30 in the morning, and the fatigued and inebriated hostesses, and their companions, poured themselves into their respective beds. Maddy was drifting off to sleep when she heard the telltale sound of creaking bed springs coming from Blair's bedroom. "Oh, fucking gross," she loudly exclaimed as she wrapped her pillow around her head, attempting to purge the sound from her consciousness. The following evening, Maddy and Blair were alone in the house. A college bowl game was on the TV. "Why is this on? You don't like football?" Maddy inquired. "No, but my Joseph did," Blair sentimentally responded. "It wouldn't be New Year's if it wasn't on, and I find it comforting. Please, dear, sit with me. I need to have a discussion with you." "Uh-oh," Maddy thought. "What did I fuck up now?" Blair began in a serious yet thoughtful tone. "I need to speak with you about responsibility. When one starts down the trail of justice, shall we say, there are certain rules that must be abided." Aunt Blair, I'm not gonna—" Maddy attempted to retort before being interrupted by Blair. "Please, dear, just listen to me. When one engages in these practices, it must be for the right reasons. It must be someone who has done something terrible or is a significant threat to someone else and who is out of the reach of conventional punishment. It must never be done for petty infractions or differences. It must never be done solely for our own gratification. Do you understand so far?" Yeah, I know, but," Maddy replied before once again being cut off. "Yes or no is all that I need from you at this moment. Now, let's continue. And there are many bad women out there as well, but I've never believed that any one of us should ever do anything to permanently harm one of our sisters. For them, I believe that their punishment, if deserving, shall come in its own natural due course. Now, if someone is to do something to another person, then that someone needs to be careful about it and take others' safety into consideration. Let's take, for example, the fiend who gunned down your uncle. He got what was coming to him, but whoever did it was sloppy. Someone innocent could have been injured or killed that way. Do you understand? Maddy just nodded her head. She had been driven by pure emotion on that evening and had not stopped to consider that someone else could have been harmed through the actions that he had forced her to take. On the other hand, if your employee's husband's accident had not actually been an accident, well, that was quite clever. As was the misfortune of your former boyfriend. How did you know about those, accidents? Maddy sheepishly inquired. Oh, I make it my business to know about a lot of things that happen in this world, especially in my neighborhoods. And through you, your neighborhood is my neighborhood. So consider me to be well informed. I want to leave you with this. If someone is going down the path of creating accidents, then it would be wise for that person to never keep any souvenirs of their exploits, and they need to create these accidents in a variety of ways. And finally, Blair looked at her niece with the same seriousness that she had just a few weeks before in the hospital bed. This conversation never happened, and will never happen again. Now, let's see what we can scrounge up for dinner, shall we? As Blair got up and cheerfully pranced toward the kitchen, Maddy thought, holy shit, she is the most loving person in the world and the coldest bitch all in one. I'm never gonna get on her bad side. The year 2019 was a year of mostly good times. Everyone's careers were going well, and their love lives continued on their predictable trajectory. Christy relished being a housewife and raising her 3 lovely children alongside her dutiful and sweet Jason. Jules' importing business was thriving, and she continued discarding used condoms as the need arose. Sam entered her second romantic merger, which turned out to be an efficient 6-month escape from the dating scene before the deal fell through. At the annulment meeting, the pair shook hands, wished each other well, and went back to their respective lives. Maddy was once again ordered to stand down. Blair and Edgar continued their very casual relationship. They never were to fall in love, but the companionship and biological benefits helped to soothe their personal angst. And Patty just continued to be Patty. Blair and Patty visited New York 6 times that year to visit their actual niece and their adopted ones. They loved Christy's children, although Patty refused to hold them if they were smelly, so she didn't hold them very often. And the karaoke Saturdays continued with the friends singing, starting out pretty well before deteriorating into drunken slurs of off-key shout singing by the final song. Edgar accompanied the pair on one occasion. Maddy returned home from work to find Patty sitting alone on the couch. Hey, what's up? Where's Aunt Blair and Edgar? Maddy inquired as she entered her small 2-bedroom apartment. Where do you think? Patty responded with a growl. They're in the bedroom fucking. Again. I'm telling you, Mads, it's fucking gross. Maddy burst into laughter as she said, Oh, that's fucking funny coming from the broad who's had a virtual pussy buffet since she was a teenager. Leave them alone and let them have their fun, for Christ's sakes. Maddy's career continued to thrive at the bookstore while her love life was a bit more of a struggle. She had 3 boyfriends that year, with the definition of a boyfriend being that if they stuck around past 3 dates, then she would sleep with them. At that point, she would see where things led. All 3 times they led to the same place, being asked to leave the man's apartment following sex, usually because the guys were coming over to watch the game, which led Maddy to wonder, how many fucking games could there possibly be? Being called up by the man for no other reason except to come over and have sex, and having the privilege to do the man's housekeeping and laundry because they had sex. It was all too predictable and disappointing, but Maddy never sought any revenge upon them. She would just break up with them as only she could by stating, Okay, this shit ain't working for me. If you just want a cum bucket, go inflate one. If you want a personal maid, then hire one. I'm looking for a man who cares about me and supports who I am, not just a lay. So, good luck or whatevs, and don't call me again. They weren't bad people, Maddy thought. They just haven't caught up yet in our society's evolution. They're just man-child knuckle-draggers. They're not a threat. They're just going to be some poor bitch's less than attentive husband. These men were not in any way evil, unlike Jack the Ripper, who had most definitely been a threat and was most definitely evil. Maddy, perhaps trying to find more appropriate outlets for her darker impulses, became infatuated by the enigmatic historical serial killer. She was both repulsed by him, because of his choice of victims, and intrigued by his ability to have never been identified, even though all of his victims were from the same London neighborhood, worked in the same profession of solicitation, and completed his murders in basically the same way. She read about additional serial killers as well and realized that the Rippers, Gacy's, and Bundys of the world appeared to carry the same personality traits. They were narcissistic sociopaths who acted out to fulfill their emotional personal need for power, and they were indiscriminate in their victims. It did not matter to them who the person was, necessarily, although they all had a victim type, whether it be children, young women, young male homosexuals, etc. What mattered was that the victims, in the killer's mind, were weaker than them and could be easily dominated. Their victims acted as a magnifying glass for their tiny ego and probable tiny penis. They were demented individuals who took bullying to a whole new level, not unlike... Holy shit, Maddy exclaimed to herself upon reaching her epiphany. They're just like every fascist world leader who has killed hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, all for their own self-satisfaction. These motherfuckers are small-time Hitlers. New Year's 2020 arrived and was joyously celebrated by the four friends, as well as Blair and Patty, who flew to New York for the occasion. The clock struck midnight, and Maddy went to a dark corner of the club by herself and spoke to her beloved uncle. Okay, Uncle Joe, I'm just gonna keep going on my promises from last year. No heavy drugs, don't get too fucked up on booze, and avoid one-night stands as much as humanly possible. Okay? I love you, Uncle Joe. Happy New Year. There was one promise from the previous year that she had omitted. Although her black duffel bag may have been lying on her closet floor collecting dust, she had begun carrying a scalpel with her in her purse for personal protection. Or so she had told herself. The ominous dark cloud was rapidly spreading from China, throughout Asia, Europe, and now had arrived in the United States. Everyone knew this was going to be bad as they watched in horror the rapidly escalating hospital and death rates from overseas. A confused and terror-stricken public searched for answers, and toilet paper, as the nation's public health experts were kept on a short leash by a power-hungry, small-handed troll of a man who trumpeted conspiracy over scientific fact, further dividing an already contentious population on something that was absurd to be divided about. It was announced that all non-essential businesses in New York City would be shut down March 20th, 2020, due to the very real and very deadly threat of COVID-19. So Maddy and her friends decided to do what many people in the city decided to do. They decided that they would go to an all-night dance club on March 18th with the full realization that this might be their last Wednesday night together for some time. They had dinner at 8 p.m. and attended a live music club at 10 p.m. before arriving at the dance club just after 1 in the morning. They, meaning Sam, decided that they would rotate who would hold the table while the others danced and flirted around the club, except for Christy, who was more than happy to dance and flirt with her bashful husband who was allowed to attend on this occasion. As the clock approached 3 in the morning at a far too rapid pace, a somewhat tall, fit young man approached Maddy at her round purple plexiglass table that she was standing at and saving while her friends drunkenly gyrated on the dance floor to the insipid, overly amplified sound that the patrons called music. He leaned over to meet her eyes and said in his most suave voice, "Hey, beautiful, can I buy you a drink?" Never one to look a gift horse in the mouth, and thinking that this might be her last chance for a good lay in a while, Maddy provocatively looked at the man, flashing him her most wicked smile, and said, "Sure, but only if you join me." "What would you like?" the man said, fighting back the anticipation of his certainty of bagging his latest conquest. "Whatever you're having," Maddy replied. "Gin and tonic?" came the response, followed by Maddy purring, "Perfect." Maddy intensely watched the man as he approached the bar and ordered the required libations that he was sure would end up in 8:30 in his mind, minutes of sexual bliss. Yeah, I could fuck him, Maddy thought, until she witnessed him putting something into one of the drinks. The man returned to the table with the drinks, and Maddy couldn't hide her slight grin as she thought to herself, "Yep, rule numero uno when accepting a drink from a stranger. Always order the same drink that they do so that they don't notice when you..." Her thought trailed off as she excitedly exclaimed while pointing to a scantily clad young woman standing behind the man. "Get a load out of that chick's dress, would ya?" As he turned to look, Maddy stealthily reversed the two glasses. The man turned back around to see Maddy eagerly sipping on her drink. "Yeah, that's really something. Some girls have no shame, huh?" the man said with an anticipatory grin. "Yeah, some guys don't either. Why don't you drink up and maybe we can find some other place to have some fun?" Maddy replied, mirroring the man's anticipatory grin while thinking, "Well, I guess it's time to come out of retirement." The man guzzled his drink and said, "Okay, want to get out of here?" "Sure do," Maddy confidently stated as she firmly grabbed the man's hand and began leading him to the exit of the dance club. They were just two faceless dark silhouettes in a sea of faceless dark silhouettes that were frequently highlighted by the flashing colorful strobes, pulsing to the monotonous thumping of the electric drum beats. The pulse of the computer-generated drivel matched the pounding of Maddy's anticipatory heart as her adrenaline began to rush. As they reached the exit, the man suddenly felt woozy and slightly stumbled. "Hey, you okay?" "Don't worry, I've gotcha," Maddy protectively stated. Once outside, they were greeted with a torrent of crisp rainfall. "Hey, let's go over here and I'll call a cab," stated Maddy as she led the man to an overhang in the dark alley next to the club. Pushing him down upon the ground between two conveniently placed rusted dumpsters, Maddy gleefully said while removing her coat, "Have a seat. I'll fix you right up, Chad." The man looked up with a perplexed expression, followed by one of horror as he felt the blade of the scalpel entering his neck and the sticky warmth of his blood running down to his collarbone. "Now, Chad, why did you go and do that?" Maddy's maniacal smile peered down upon him like a demented rag doll. "If you wanted to get into my pants, all you had to do was ask. I was up for it." Her steel-toned monologue continued as she forcefully inserted the scalpel into his neck, over and over, splattering blood onto her hands, forearm, and dress before turning her attention to wild slashes upon his face. Streams of crimson covered his dying expression as she concluded, "How many chicks have you raped, anyway? How many women's lives have you ruined? How many, Chad? How many? How many women's lives? Well, no more for you. You'll never send another woman into a physical and emotional hell ever again." Pleased by her latest work, she stared at him with a slightly cocked head, her rage-filled green eyes meeting his that were now near lifeless. She provided one more blow by fiercely plunging the scarlet-covered scalpel into his heart while saying, "This one's for ruining my dress, prick." Maddy confidently stood and stepped out from under the overhang and into the foggy cascade of chilled rainfall. Diluted pools of blood appeared at her feet as her body and clothing were being washed clean from the evening's violent escapade. She looked down the alleyway. Noticing that the bustling city's inhabitants were completely unaware of anything outside of their own personal interest, she put her coat back on over her drenched party dress, turned, and strode down the alley in the opposite direction, hailing a cab at the next street. She quickly texted Sam and said, "Just not feeling it anymore tonight." Grabbed a cab. "Going home. Call tomorrow." Music sucked. She had not bothered to take a final look at the brutally slashed corpse, passively lying there with the rest of the city's refuge. He was too insignificant to waste a final gaze upon. Chapter 13. No More Hot Dogs. New York City, like most of the world, was a dystopian existence with people forced into isolation from one another due to the steady march of the COVID pandemic. Making matters worse, family members and neighbors were pitted against one another by tinfoil hat conspiracy theories at a time when we most needed to be working together as a community. In Wisconsin, Blair and Edgar decided to pool their resources, both economic and emotional, and move in together for the duration of the virus. Due to their age, they were both of higher risk of hospitalization and death should they contact the virus. They both watched in horror as friends around their own age began succumbing to the cruel pandemic. They spent many nights holding each other on the couch watching the news and weeping. Blair also spent time each day monitoring death reports in the Brooklyn area. Out of concern for her niece, she closely watched the progression of the virus as well as reviewed the cause of other deaths in that area. Patty, at the age of 68, was planning on retiring in mid-2020 from the 56-bed assisted living complex that she was employed at, but decided to continue working there out of her great sense of responsibility to her clients and employer. It was not uncommon for her to work 16-hour shifts or more as the virus deteriorated the nation's nursing and medical workforce. Patty threw herself into her work and remained mostly on emotional autopilot as she watched many of her cherished clients pass away, usually because a staff member had brought the virus onto the premises. Of the 56 people living there, 19 had died by the end of 2020. Patty herself contracted COVID in the fall of 2020 but did not require hospitalization. She was down for the better part of a week and back at work within 2 weeks of her initial positive test. When Blair, who was unable to see her sister throughout this period, asked Patty over the phone why she thought she did not have a worse case, Patty simply said, "Clean fucking living," as she took a shot of tequila while smoking a cigarette on one of her few days off. Maddy's parents, like the rest of their congregation, refused to abide by shutdown orders for large gatherings and continued to attend their church/cult services. Their rhetoric matched that of the rest of the unhinged right in the nation and preached about their personal freedom to do what they wished. This, to Maddy, seemed contradictory to the preaching of Christ, who held that we should work toward the common good of everyone, not just ourselves. There were also vile disparagements placed upon esteemed scientists and medical professionals whose only crime was trying to help the world out of an international pandemic with the least amount of lost life possible. As is always the case with these types of people, the foundation for their propaganda was their own perceived benefit over the common good of others in our communities. Uncle Joe would take a flamethrower to this fucking place, Maddy thought as she heard reports of these large congregations flaunting their nose at everyone else's safety and well-being. In their minds, they were the chosen ones, whom God Almighty would shepherd through his hardship. Personal responsibility based upon facts once again lost out to the willfully ignorant cop-out of God's will. Predictably, their church, like many throughout the nation, experienced a harsh outbreak. Maddy's parents were afflicted, with her father being hospitalized for 5 days on a ventilator before being released. Her mother carried long-term symptoms permanently. 8 members of the congregation perished, and her parents never conceded that they or anyone in the congregation had it. They held on to their lies willingly in the face of actual personal experience. They held on to those lies as fiercely as they would hold on to the laughably transparent lies of a stolen election at the end of that year, and would march to the Capitol, despite being quite short of breath, to illegally overthrow the United States government during the domestic coup attempt of January 6, 2021. When Blair told Maddy about the church outbreak, including the condition of her parents and the deaths of the others, Maddy's only response was, "God's will, I guess. Should've worn a mask, motherfuckers." When Blair told Maddy about her parents' peripheral involvement on January 6, Maddy's response was, "Fuck, I really need to change my last name," followed by laughter and a mocking chant of, "Lock them up, lock them up, lock them up." During the shutdown period of the pandemic, Maddy was as isolated as everyone else, for the most part. However, the bookstore was booming as mail orders from bored, homebound people used the pandemic as an opportunity to catch up on their reading, learning new skills, or as a simple escape from the daily stress. Maddy's staff were all laid off, but taken care of for the most part through the Paycheck Protection Program. She increased her work hours and was alone in the store processing deliveries and shipping orders for 10 to 12 hours per day, 7 days per week, in order to keep up with the demand. It was also a needed distraction from the emotional, mental, physical, and political tragedy that was unfolding daily. Watching the deterioration of communities through sickness, death, and societal disharmony was like watching a slow-moving train wreck that you had no control over. Monica frequently offered to come in and assist Maddy, but was always told, "Nope, I got this. Just enjoy your time off as best you can. I'll call you if I need you." The bookstore also offered a large private space to hold a safe, socially distanced gathering each week with Sam, Jules, and Christy. Each lady would bring their own snacks and drinks, sit in a large circle in the back of the store, and re-engage each other with their weekly tradition. Upon its completion, Maddy would sanitize the entire area. When not working, Maddy was also expanding her reading list, as well as going back and watching some of her favorite movies, such as those directed by Quentin Tarantino. During this time, she subscribed to a horror streaming channel and lay in bed under the covers eating junk food and shudder in delight at the images from classic slasher and giallo films. One of her and Uncle Joe's heroes had also revived his career around this time, and Maddy both wept during and laughed at the offbeat commentary during breaks in the presented movie while talking to the spirit of her uncle. "What's Joe Bob got for us tonight?" she would inquire of Joe's spirit as she settled into the 4 to 5 hour splatter and joke-filled marathon, butter ripple, when she could find it, dripping down her chin and onto her top cover. Due to employee shortages and disrupted supply chain issues, basic goods were often in short supply. These problems were exacerbated by hoarders and, especially, black market operators who never failed to seek personal gain from human suffering. This was true at the onset of the pandemic in 2020 and experienced a resurgence as the Omicron variant once again severely stressed the nation's healthcare system. The intensity and destruction of the variant was unnecessary. Following a brief reprieve and ray of hope of the pandemic's conclusion in the summer 2021, tens of thousands of willfully unvaccinated people perished that fall and winter. And those ill-informed or simply apathetic people risked the lives of the civilized, vaccinated people who were at higher risk due to their age or underlying health conditions. It was in this environment that shortages again became pronounced, especially baby formula. Maddy climbed the stairs toward her second-floor apartment when she heard sobbing on the floor above. Sitting on the top step was a despondent Abana and her 3-month-old son. Abana and her military husband had moved into the building a few months before her son's delivery. She was soft-spoken and mostly kept to herself, although she would always present a pleasant greeting when encountered. "Hey, what's up?" Maddy cautiously inquired. Abana blurted out through her anguish, "Oh, Maddy, I don't know what to do. I stood in line for 3 hours to get formula today, and they were out by the time I could get in there. It was the only place that got a shipment today, and there's no place that's getting any for the next 2 days. I don't know what to do. How will I feed my baby? What will I do? The churches are out too. I just don't know what to—" Hey, calm down just a sec, okay?" Maddy interrupted in a soothing voice, reminiscent of her Aunt Blair's. "Just go into your apartment and let me see if I can figure something out, okay? I'll be up in a little bit." Maddy's stomach sunk as she descended the staircase and entered her apartment. She thought that she knew where she could get some formula. A little bird had told her that the same guy who had sold her the heroin that nearly killed her had branched out during the pandemic and was dealing in essential black market goods. She had never wanted to see his face again but could think of no other options. She pulled the black duffel bag from her closet floor and took out the latest burner cell phone. As the phone rang, she was changing her clothes. Gone was the cute olive autumn dress over the tan leggings, and on were the black jeans, baggy black hoodie, and size 8 boots. With the addition of the sunglasses and black COVID mask, she looked like the world's least ferocious ninja. Maddy's side of the conversation went like this. "Hey, I heard you have baby formula. That true? How much? A better price if I do what? Well, maybe. Where are you, and we can negotiate once I get there." She knocked on Abana's door, who graciously invited her in. "Okay, I got a lead on some, but no promises. 2 questions. Can you get someone to watch the kid? And do you have access to a car, preferably a van?" Yes, my neighbor can watch him, and I think that I could borrow our church van for a while," Abana replied. "Good. I'm going to go see if I can strike a deal. If I do, I'll call you. Be ready to pick me up with the van. And Abana, this shit's illegal as fuck, so no questions, and we never had this conversation. Got it?" Yes, Abana replied, now wondering what she may have gotten herself into. Maddy arrived at the small storage building in a mostly abandoned industrial park. She gave the signal with 4 rapid knocks, immediately returning her right hand to her hoodie pocket in order to clench her stun gun. This matched her left hand that was already clenching her pepper spray. The heavy steel door opened with an ominous squeak. Inside the doorway was an unshaven, long-haired, and overweight middle-aged man wearing a dirty sweatshirt and sweatpants. He was eating a hot dog as ketchup slovenly rolled down his chin. "I see you haven't changed your look that much," the man dismissively said. "Yeah, you're looking great too. Let's not fuck around. How much stuff you got?" Maddy inquired hastily. "I've got 10 cases, 6 big cans per case. For you?" "500 a case," the man replied. "You're fucking nuts," Maddy exclaimed. "That shit goes for less than 200 retail. And since I know you didn't pay a fucking dime for it, that's what I'll pay. $2,000 cash for all 10 cases. Take it or leave it." The man presented a devilish grin before saying, "What about my little offer on the phone? 5,000 cash or 2,000 and you suck my cock naked. Take it or leave it." Maddy shook her head in disgust. A familiar feeling that was part anger, part vindictiveness, and part exhilaration was beginning to sweep over her. It was bad enough that these vultures were exploiting the lower and working class families during this time of crisis, but to require blowing his sweaty cock too? "Dude, you really shouldn't push me on this, 'cause I'm not in the best of moods. I'm going to shoot you one last offer, and I suggest you take it. For starters, I'm not putting your COVID cock in my mouth, so how about this? You sit in that chair, I'll do a little tease for you down to my bra and panties, and then give you a hand job. But my gloves stay on. Deal? Yeah. Alright, baby. I've always wanted to see what you've been hiding under all of that black. Oh, you're gonna find out all about me today, big boy. Maddy innocently replied as she began removing her boots and socks. She then began swaying her hips while sliding out of the baggy jeans, kicking them far away from the chair. She sauntered closer to the chair while lifting the black hoodie over her head, discarding it at his feet with the right pocket easily accessible. She got on her knees in front of him. With her left hand, she pulled down on the waistband of his sweatpants. With her right hand, she pulled out the stun gun. You ready to have some fun? She breathily whispered, attempting to channel Marilyn as she lifted his hairy and sweaty roll of fat to reveal his fully erect 4-inch penis. Oh, fuck yeah, baby, let's have some fun, the man excitedly screamed. His scream increased in volume, pitch, and shrillness as 50,000 volts flowed into his body through his testicles. Zip ties were immediately removed from the black duffel and placed around his ankles and wrists, tying him to the chair. Duct tape was placed over his mouth before the smelling salts were applied. The disoriented man alarmingly re-entered consciousness and looked into the steely emerald eyes of a barely dressed mini assassin. She was holding a knife and wearing the grin of a demented clown. Now, we're going to figure out if my definition of fun and your definition of fun are the same thing. I'll tell you what. I'll start. Maddy then jumped and squealed with delight as she said, "Oh my fucking god. Do you know what this reminds me of? It's just like that scene in that Tarantino movie. You know, where the guy dances around the tied-up guy and cuts off his ear and shit. And you did say you wanted to see me dance, so this feels like a win-win. But I don't want to totally rip off the master. Plus, I'm a red, not a blonde, so what shall we dance to?" Oh, I know, Maddy deviously stated before getting in the man's face, bouncing her head back and forth while beginning the introductory laughs of Hassel Adkins' No More Hot Dogs. She then began singing the verses of the most demented song that she had ever heard. It was a song about a person being decapitated and their head being mounted on the wall. It was graphic and twisted. Needless to say, it was one of Maddy's favorites. Maddy pranced around the room, occasionally sticking him in non-lethal areas of the body with the knife. As she glided around her quarry, she was certain that she was perfectly emulating the coolness of Michael Madsen in Reservoir Dogs. In reality, she looked more like a recovering hip surgery patient having a seizure. Her jerky contortions only contributed to the man's confusion and horror as Maddy sang verse after verse, adding the required demented laughter and smiling with her copper hair bouncing in a frenzy. At the song's conclusion, Maddy got back down on her knees in front of the man. She looked up and stared at the crimson pools at various places on his clothing. "Okay, I say that was fun. Now, it's your turn. Let's see here. I don't really want to give you a hand job at this point, so how about I do something else for you and let you have one more hot dog?" With a maniacal look of glee, Maddy began sawing through the now flaccid penis with her serrated knife. Jesus Christ, this is harder than cutting through raw chicken. Maddy grunted before the penis completely separated from the body, a torrent of sticky blood hitting Maddy right in the face. "Oh, fuck. I didn't expect you to jizz that much blood. And during COVID too, you prick." She got to her feet, looking much like the title character from the finale of Carrie, her auburn hair, face, and body saturated with the crimson molasses. "Okay, motherfucker. Here's your last hot dog," she stated as she pulled back the duct tape, shoved the dismembered penis into the man's mouth, and placed the duct tape back. She then put duct tape over the man's nose. As she watched the man gasping for air and grasping for his life with him bleeding profusely out of his groin, aspirating from the lack of oxygen and gagging on his own phallus, Maddy thought, "I'd hate to be the coroner who has to figure out this cause of death. Maybe they'll just chuck off everything on column A and be done with it." There was a final exhale as the man's frozen face projected the very definition of fear. Maddy cut off the zip ties and duct tape and placed them in the garbage bag. The mutilated penis hanging out of the man's mouth looked like a piece of half-chewed, uncooked pork. She was about to wash herself off in the sink when a glistening metal object caught her eye from the corner of the room. "Oh, fuck it. I'm already covered in blood and shit. May as well go all the way." she said aloud to herself as she picked up the newly discovered axe. She stood with her hands on her barely clad hips and looked with pride at the head that she had just mounted on the wall. Fuck, man, she said aloud. I've outdone Hasil. I've put 2 heads on the wall, and as they say, 2 heads are better than 1. Upon saying this, Maddy immediately became despondent as she realized that she had no audience to hear what she was sure was the greatest joke in the history of the world. Maddy finally went to the industrial sink and completely washed herself before placing her bra, panties, and gloves in the ever-present garbage bag. She then put her black clothes on, including new gloves, and called Abana. Get your ass over here with the van, now, Maddy ordered. 30 minutes later, Maddy and Abana were loading the borrowed van with 10 cases of formula plus several packages of diapers and a box of various medications that Maddy had already placed outside of the locked building. Before leaving the site, Maddy unlocked the door to the building and cracked the door open. Looters will be here soon. They'll take as much shit as they can and leave tons of evidence. The cops will never figure this one out, even if they want to. Maddy was soaking in a well-deserved hot bath that evening, steam rising around her sweat-covered, lightly freckled face that carried a look of relaxed self-satisfaction. She thought back to the conversation that she had with Abana on the way back home. Upon Abana's inquiry as to what she owed her, Maddy simply said, "You don't owe me shit, except to never talk about this, okay? Oh, and if I ever need you to say that I was with you at some point, you'll do that for me. Okay?" Abana smiled and said, "Of course. That's the least I can do. Thank you for helping me and my baby." The conversation ended with Maddy's dismissive and rather arrogant comment, "No prob. It's what I do, or else my name isn't Maddy fucking Summers. And that's my name, so that's what I do." At the moment that Maddy was soaking in her bath, nearly 1,100 miles away, a man was going berserk. He was taking an aluminum baseball bat to every electronic device in his home. Shards of plastic were flying like shrapnel as the man thrashed every television, phone, and computer in his path, his enraged red face engorged with blood. The man's wife was screaming at him to stop, which he eventually did, but not until his destruction of the devices was complete and the home resembled a disaster area. He was filled with both rage and remorse as he watched her leave the home with her hastily packed suitcase. He then said aloud, "Fuck this. I'm going to New York." And that's where we'll leave off for today. So thank you all so much for joining me for these 2 chapters of Hanging Chads. If you liked it, make sure to check out everything that's backlogged here on Fansly, as well as over on the YouTube channel, both Whatta channel and The Soloist containing all of the games from the Twitch. You can also find me over on Twitter at @the_soloist_2014. I believe that's what it is. Don't quote me on that. It's all in a Linktree link that's living on here, so make sure to check that out. Thank you guys again. This one was incredibly graphic, and I will see you for some more House Party next week. Bye-bye.